And for more on the latest developments, we're now being joined by Alon Burstein, who is a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at the University of California. Thank you very much for joining us in WION, Mr. Burstein. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Now, Mr. Burstein, Israel's NSA has indicated war against Hezbollah likely once Hamas is defeated. How imminent is a threat of a multi-front war, keeping in mind that the Houthi threats from Yemen are also coming towards Israel?
Well, Israel is very fearful that Hezbollah was going to enter the war with Hamas, and Hamas mounted a lot of pressure on Hezbollah to join the war on October 7th, and I think that everyone's a little bit surprised that Hezbollah did not join the war. And there's all kinds of thoughts and intelligence on why that may be. And the reason is likely that Hezbollah is scared that it'll drag Lebanon into a war that will then make it lose favor in Lebanon. But in Israel, there is this growing fear that there appeared to be previously this sense of security, the sense that Hezbollah and Hamas train a lot on the border, but really they're never going to attack Israel. All they can do is launch missiles. October 7th blew up in Israel's face and showed, no, the fact that these organizations are constantly training means they can invade one day. So even if Hamas is quote-unquote defeated, Israel has now evacuated up to upwards of 10 kilometers of its settlements near the borders with Lebanon. All the civilians are evacuated out of fear Lebanon will invade. So that's what they're saying. Even if Hamas is defeated, Hezbollah now may launch on October 7th from Lebanon tomorrow or in a month. So that's why Israel's saying even if that happens, they need to deal with what happens with Hezbollah up north in one way or another.
Well, Mr. Burstein, talking about the attack from Hezbollah, my question to you is that the fear regarding Hezbollah's Radwan force is that within minutes it could cross the border and begin a murderous rampage in northern communities. Do you think that Israel right now fears another October 7th style attack from its northern border?
I think it very much fears that attack. I think Hezbollah has lost the element of surprise. What Hamas really had on October 7th was a vast element of surprise. And that's one of the reasons that Hezbollah likely will not do that in the coming days. But what Israel is trying to indicate is, let's say that the war with Gaza is over, either through defeating Hamas somehow or some sort of ceasefire or something is over. The idea that Israel can just go back and civilians can go back and expect to live peacefully near the border with Lebanon is not realistic. Now, there is already, dating back to 2006, a UN resolution, Resolution 1701, that says that Hezbollah cannot maintain its forces south of the Litani River, i.e. it is supposed to be pushed farther back in Lebanon. So what Israel is trying to say is it wants a diplomatic solution and it wants Hezbollah away from the border, trying to imply Lebanon can do this, maybe other forces can do this, maybe UNIFIL can do this. If not, then Israel will have to do this. They're trying to say they're not willing to live with a situation with the Radwan force on its borders. However, if someone else wants to do that instead and avoid a war between Israel and Lebanon, by all means, let them do that. That's what Israel's threats are sort of indicating. They're almost asking someone else to do it instead.
Right, Mr. Burstein, but the questioning that, do you see that there's a chance of any diplomatic action taking place at the moment, which would deter Hezbollah from attacking?
There's no real force in Lebanon that has enough strength to pull Hezbollah out of the southern parts of Lebanon militarily. The only way that this can happen is if Hezbollah is convinced to do this, likely due to some deal that happens within Lebanon. So it's possible Lebanon, for example, is in a monumental debt to the World Bank. Its inflation has completely crashed. It's possible if, for example, European countries or the United States or other countries were to help bail Lebanon out, but in exchange, Lebanon would need to use some of that money to pay more soldiers to bring Hezbollah up from the south. It's possible that some deal like that could happen. Right now, Lebanon desperately does not want a war with Israel. It has put out messages every which way saying, we don't want a war, we don't want Hezbollah to drag us into the war, please make sure Hezbollah does not start a war. But there's no one who actually has the force to do that. So even though Lebanon does not want a war, and Israel to a large extent would probably rather avoid the war, no one can force Hezbollah to do that right now unless Israel invades. I think the hope is that Israel will somehow scare some sort of international body to say, okay, you know what, we're going to try to take responsibility for this because otherwise Israel is going to invade.
Right, Mr. Burstein, my last question to you, that the Israeli NSA also said that if Hezbollah remains a dangerous threat on the other side of the border, then it will impose a new reality in the north. Shed some light, what does he mean when he says new reality?
So in the past, Israel has invaded Lebanon several times. And back in 1982, it actually took over most of Lebanon and tried to even install a president and have a peace treaty with Lebanon. That obviously did not work. But I think what they're trying to say is that right now the region is really poised to explode. There's Iranian militias in Lebanon and in Syria and in Iraq and in Yemen. And all of them are threatening that if this war escalates further and further, it's going to explode. I think what they're trying to say is that Israel's not going to be willing to go back to a situation where it just lives the way it was and pretends that there is not this Iranian threat from the north. So something has to change as far as Israel's concerned with that equation. It's possible that what they're indicating is that it will be an all-out regional war, that Israel will be willing to, tear off all the gloves and take over Lebanon in order to try to impose a new reality. It's also possible that Israel will simply, as they have been threatening, will simply say, look what's happened to Gaza. Beirut can also become like Gaza or like Khan Yunis. I think what Israel's trying to say is it's sort of not willing to play the game anymore, where Hezbollah occasionally launches rockets and then occasionally Israel retaliates, but that's it. It's demanding a new reality. And I think they're deliberately being vague. They're deliberately saying, and we want people to be scared of what we mean because we want someone else to come take responsibility for this. So be scared of the fact that we're saying we're going to impose something different and you don't know what we mean.
Right.
Honestly, I think that's their strategy.
Right, Mr. Burstein, thanks very much for joining us from WION and sharing insights with us.
Thank you. Have a good day.